on this episode of the Brothers Mysterium.
She's on concrete, she's bleeding, and there's sirens, and this is like almost like a crime scene.
Well, that's when you've crossed the line out from a private reading into more of showmanship, entertainment value.
And fraud.
Right, exactly.
And fraud.
Good thing neither of us died in between then and now, because we would have completely wiped out my Houdini test.
They're missing a leg. I go, missing a leg? I said, no.
On today's show, we explore group readings as we continue our discussion on mediums. This is Speaking with Spirits, Part 2.
My brother and I have always been intrigued by the unexplainable. Like many, we're fascinated with stories of the supernatural, fringe science, and modern-day mysteries.
Though we've seen no first-hand proof of its existence, our minds remain open to the possibility.
Unsatisfied with the so-called evidence on television and the internet, we are choosing to take matters into our own hands and conduct our own interviews and research.
Now we're on a quest to speak with as many people as we can and hear the stories of these events from those who have lived them.
No Hollywood effects or exaggerations, and no hidden agenda. We invite you to listen and decide what and who you believe.
We are the Brothers Mysterium.
Welcome to another episode of The Brothers Mysterium. I'm Tommy alongside Eric.
Hey, yo.
And we are once again rocking and rolling with Bert, our resident medium expert. Part 2 of his interview. I'm excited.
Should we recap a little bit last time? I mean, not necessarily the interview, but just some of the details of Bert's story, just so people are familiar with it.
Absolutely.
All right. So, just some of the details from last time. Bert's father, Anthony, passed away in 1993. Okay. Now, his grandfather on his mother's side, who is named Jerry, is the owner of the BMW, who was very active in Bert's life as he grew up. Jerry's father is Joseph, who is Bert's great-grandfather on his mother's side. And he comes through every now and then along with Anthony, Bert's father.
That is correct. And thus far in the story, Bert has only spoken to one medium via telephone, which I initially was very against and didn't think would work, but apparently I was incorrect, at least in this case. And he's had some incredible readings. She did some spot-on reading.
Yeah.
And, it was impressive.
Yeah, it definitely was impressive. And just like you, I was kind of skeptical about the whole doing the reading over the phone thing. But even though it was on the phone, and even though there were some things thrown in there that were kind of generic that could have almost applied to anyone, she was still able to know kind of personal details about his life that I don't think you could just easily obtain.
The haunting image in my mind is him on the front lawn, and she basically nailed that whole thing. So a lot of impressive spot on descriptions coming from her. And now we're transitioning to Bert's first time going to group readings with a different medium, another woman who's sort of world famous, has books out there, Concetta Bertolli, and who better to tell it than Bert himself? So let's jump back into it, where Bert is heading into the group reading session.
Here we go.
So some time had actually passed, interestingly, and I went to a new psychic, this psychic named Concetta Bertolli, who has actually gotten a lot of notoriety. She's released a couple books.
I've heard the name before.
She has not appeared on television, but I believe that's probably what's next in the line of things.
How much time has gone past from that first phone call?
Smart. That's about a year.
And what has led you now to say, I'm going to reach out to somebody and I'm going to try somebody new?
It was a show. And rather than a private reading, this was somebody.
So this was a group?
This was a group.
Oh, this is a whole new dynamic.
A whole new dynamic. And
Let me ask you one random question, just because it's on the top of my head. Have you ever heard of, or does it ever happen, where a person will go to a medium, or say you paid your money up front, she calls you and she says, hey, listen, nobody's coming through right now. Does that happen?
It hasn't happened to me personally. I've seen on John Edwards' television show him pick somebody out and basically out of the audience, which is what he does. He just randomly picks.
Right.
And really not get as much as he should.
And that's the family where they had the fire. There was 2 houses on one property.
I don't know about that.
There's a lot of land, and it feels like there's a couple of buildings on the same land. So I don't know if this was like multiple houses, or if it's like a house and 2 other things, or, whatever this. I don't know what this is, but I feel like there's like a fire thing that comes up with this.
I don't see a thing.
Right.
Or could in other circumstances. So you do get your duds.
And it's similarly, like, you got lucky, you were reaching out to your father, he came through.
Right.
I've seen a couple shows like Long Island Medium, whatever, where
Yes.
I'm looking to see my mother, and you get, Uncle Frank instead.
That does happen.
So it's not, I guess if it was always who you wanted, it would be a little more
that does happen.
suspect.
Well, that's like what you said. Your great grandfather came through before your father, right?
Yeah, and I didn't ask for him. I wasn't even thinking about him.
Right.
Okay.
I can tell you that one of the things that these psychics and mediums and whatnot say is that the person with the strongest personality usually comes through.
Makes sense.
And basically what they say is that it takes a lot of energy for the person from the other side to communicate. And so a person who's here on Earth, shyer and somebody who kind of stays in the background, would not be as capable or as able. The person who really has a very strong personality will be able to come through. And usually and what I've seen, not only in my own readings, but in other readings, you're never really going to get somebody so random and so out of left field. It's never going to be the way I see it. It's never going to be a great uncle or a long distant cousin. It just doesn't really happen.
And I guess you'd assume that their energy, spirit just isn't connected with you enough that it would.
Well, the other thing about that is it's that, but it's also too is that the person comes through and it's somebody who's usually very directly linked to you. And the reason I believe, and other mediums believe, that they come through that person who's very direct, a father, let's say, or a grandfather, is because they are around you. They are somebody who is in your presence when you're not on the call.
As she said, your father was with you at the test drive. My
feel of it is that he had probably heard me the weeks prior saying to a family member, "Oh my God, I'm so I can't wait for this call. This is going to be great. I hope he comes through." Blah 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 blah. He picked up on that, knew the date, knew the time, knew it was coming up, and was ready for it. Whereas, an Uncle Clarence who is out and about doing his own thing, or maybe around his own family,
right?
He's not hearing your conversation.
He'd probably rather channel his energy towards someone that he would rather talk to.
Right.
No offense.
No, that's exactly.
But Uncle Clarence just doesn't like you that much.
He's just not around that much. Yeah. He's just. So that's what that is.
You don't really have an Uncle Clarence, do you?
I do not.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where the name came from, but.
Okay, so back to Bert's story. As he said earlier, about a year has gone by since his over-the-phone reading with Cindy Lane Newcomb. Bert is once again feeling that need to reach out to the other side. It's right around this time that he comes across the name he mentioned earlier, Concetta Bertolli. A bookstore in Bert's neighborhood had just scheduled her for a meet and greet to promo her latest book about communicating with the dead and seeing to the other side. When Bert finds out that she's also a medium, it piques his interest. So he starts doing a little research.
And I found out that what she does is she does private readings, but she also does shows, actual group gatherings. So interestingly enough, I found that she was having a show in November this was November 2011. So this was about a year and 2 months since I had been to the past psychic. So I'm there and I got a ticket, went there, and it was a whole different experience being in a show.
Bert finds himself in a conference room at a hotel in Secaucus, New Jersey. In the center of the room, there's a chair for Concetta Bertolli, and surrounding it, in the shape of a circle, are other chairs for the participants to sit in. In total, there are an estimated 100 people in attendance.
So she crammed as many people in there as she possibly could. What happens is, at least for her, and this is, I think every medium psychic has a different way of reaching out to people, especially in a group setting. And if you ever watch John Edward, he will go, "I'm getting a J and I'm getting them in this section." the third section over here. And then some people go, oh, I have a cousin Joe. There are no volunteers. You can't raise your hand and say, hey, John, over here.
It's the reverse.
He's got to be pointed. She actually takes volunteers.
Ah,
So you will raise your hand and she'll call on you. Now, everybody raises their hand.
of course.
Yeah.
Everybody raises their hand.
That's why they're there. Yeah.
So
Yeah, nobody says, not me.
not
thanks.
me, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
why
just
they're
here to
there.
watch.
You're not
Yeah.
here to spectate.
Right.
So some interesting things that she came
So the big
across
difference
was-
between a guy like John Edward and Concetta Bertolli
It's
is
always
at Concetta's show,
somebody
you can volunteer.
because-
Now, if you consider the practice of cold reading, the volunteer audience actually makes it a lot more difficult because it takes away your ability to bait members of the crowd with general statements. Does this mean that Concetta Bertolli is a little more daring and precise with her cold reading?
So
Or is she going to turn out to be the real
this is-
deal?
it's always interesting to see somebody else getting read because you're like her, you don't know much going into it. You're not looking for things. Just kind of sit back and kind of observe and kind of take notes without having to be on the hot seat.
Right.
So there was these, I guess 4 teenagers that were there, 18, 19. And they were there with a mother and a father. And it didn't look like the teenagers were all related. And this is just one example of many examples of people who had, she had read that day. And this will always stick out to me. She had 4 teenagers that were there. They didn't look like they were all related. One of them looked like they were related to the parents. And they seemed kind of upset, kind of like shaky. And she says, okay, you. And I guess it was 6 people in total from this group, called on one of them. It was the teenager she called on. And she goes, I feel like you're here for somebody who passed recently and somebody who was very young and went before their time. And they said yes. Yeah, that's what we're here for. It was a couple months ago. And she says, okay. She goes, now, was this, I feel like there was an auto accident, or I feel like this was something that was like a tragedy. And they're like, yeah, that's one way to describe it. And she goes, okay, all right. Now, I'm seeing this person, it's a female, about your age. And they're like, yeah. And she's like, okay. I'm seeing her on the ground. I'm seeing her on the concrete, and she's bleeding. She's on concrete, she's bleeding, and there's sirens. And this is like almost like a crime scene. And she goes, would that be accurate? And I guess what's interesting to mention is that this person who's coming across, it seems like a young adult female, probably about 18 or 19, is now projecting
Her own
death.
Yeah.
And it's however she's creating that image, it's pretty interesting. And she says, okay, is that accurate that it's almost like a crime scene, if you will? And she said, yeah. And the one teenager looks over at the parents and kind of got a verbal permission. You can explain what happened. I guess this is something that was kind of on the down low. And said she was actually murdered. And she goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry. All right, okay. She goes, now, I feel like they didn't get the guy, but they got the guy now. And she goes, yeah. And the one teenager verified and said, yeah, they got him. It took some time, but they eventually got him. And she goes, this wasn't somebody like you even knew. The psychic says, this wasn't somebody you even knew. This wasn't somebody that like was related to you guys. It wasn't like it was a past incident that led to this. This was almost like a random. She was, that's got to be it. It was a random. And they said, yeah, this was a random. It was somebody we were so shocked that this had happened because, our friend didn't have any enemies or anybody that she was kind of at odds with. And so she says, all right. She goes, it's very important that I tell you that I think she eventually did nail this girl's name, is telling me that she is beyond it. She is moved way beyond the situation. She is not upset by it. This is something that she's now no longer focusing on. And she wants me to tell you that there's justice on this side in the form of jail or whatever it may be. But she also wants me to tell you that there's some form of justice on the other side too.
Wow.
And I think that's important to people, that they not only provide an insight to whatever this other side may be, but it's important to know that somebody's going to get theirs. It's that whole karma thing.
Right.
Somebody wrongs you or whatever it may be, on whatever level it may be, and you go, is that person ever going to get theirs? Well, apparently they do. Just based on what was said.
Right.
So another interesting insight, and let me back up a little. This Concetta Bertolli, like John Edward, but unlike the person I spoke with on the phone, really makes it their mission to provide as much insight to the other side as they possibly can. The basis of their books is that. And so I think I mentioned before that this Concetta Bertolli released a book at a bookstore. That book really was just basically an insight to the other side, at least what she's seen. And many people have come up with, these psychics, these mediums have come up with varying ideas, but to a certain extent, they're all very similar. Nobody's really been able to pinpoint exactly what it looks like. They can't tell you, okay, well, this is green or that's blue, or,
Right.
but to an extent, they're able to tell you what it is. So going along those lines, she had actually mentioned that she got called to these two parents, and they looked like they were really young, maybe in their 30s, early 30s. And she said that, I feel like there's a young person involved in this. Mother starts crying, the whole thing. The husband / father takes over and says, yeah, okay, so this is our son. And just, oh my God. She goes, I feel like the son had almost like a mental disorder of some sort. And I feel like the mental disorder is what caused this, is what caused their death. And she goes, and the mother says, yeah, okay. She goes, now, did he have like a hard time like moving? He was like kind of immobile. And she's like, yeah, partially. Like he was partially immobile. So the psychic goes, right. And I feel like there was like one particular sport that he enjoyed, and he tried to enjoy it as much as he possibly could, but much to his obstacle and much to your, meaning the parents, emotional distress, he couldn't enjoy it to the full length that he could have if he was healthy. And the mother says yes, and she goes, it was soccer. He just always had this affinity towards soccer, whether it be a video game or watching it on TV or in person. We tried to get him out in the field, and he was barred, of course, because of his disorder from playing with the other kids. But we would take him out in the field, and it was just something that he would get a couple minutes in, but he couldn't do it. She goes, okay, well, he's coming through. He's here. And what's interesting about this is that we find out that this young boy is about 3 years old.
Oh, very young boy.
Yeah, so I think 3 or 4. So that type of person still has the power to come through. And I guess in some way enunciate what happened. And not only that, but for him to enunciate what's happened and what was happening before he passed, he has to be evolved.
He has to almost age.
He almost has to age, because he wouldn't have been able to do that, and also be healed.
Right.
Because this was not something that he'd be able to tell you. He wouldn't have been able to tell you before, oh, by the way, he wouldn't be able to tell you on Earth, I can't kick a soccer ball because I have a mental disability.
So it's almost as if he's been cured on the other side.
He's been cured.
And he's...
So she says, this woman says, I want to let you know that he is on the other side, and he's playing soccer over there. There's soccer fields over there in some form, and he is evolved. And she used the word evolved. She goes, not necessarily a different person. She goes, he's the same person, but he is evolved. And I guess how she meant that was healed. And it's interesting when somebody mentions that type of word, because it's kind of ambiguous. What does evolved mean? And you can take it from wherever you want it. But you can take it wherever you want to take it. But to me, and I think to the parents, it meant he is healed. He is beyond his emotional, mental, physical restraints. And he is now able, and he certainly wasn't able before. And so I think that's a perfect example of giving somebody closure.
Right.
And absolutely. I think the parents felt like they necessarily couldn't say goodbye to him, because I don't think he was in a state to say goodbye. It wasn't like, you go into your grandfather's hospital room and you have your sweet goodbyes and he's able to tell you what's going on. that never happened. And I feel like they felt gypped almost because they never actually able to have closure with him because he couldn't enunciate closure. He couldn't speak that. So I guess that was to them something of a closing door for them.
All right. On to that question you've all been thinking about. How did Bert do at this show?
I did not get picked. I came up dry.
After this somewhat disappointing group session, Bert leaves with one question weighing heavily on his mind.
How can I get picked next time?
So, Bert goes ahead and buys a ticket for a show almost exactly 1 year to the date after his first group medium session.
Same woman.
Same woman.
Same location?
Same location.
The only difference is, this time around, Bert has a plan.
And I wore a neon green shirt.
So you wanted to glow in the dark, make sure?
Yes, exactly. I wore a neon green shirt. I got there early. I got a seat that was in a section that she had previously called on and spent a lot of time on before.
So you had done your homework.
I had done my homework.
See, these are good tips because this is not only insight into what a medium can do on the other side, it's also great tips from a professional of how to make sure you get picked.
And interestingly enough, too, when I got there so early, and it wasn't like the crack of dawn early, but like let's say the show started at 11, I got there at about 10, and I think the doors opened at 10:30, and I had an opportunity to actually speak to her.
Bert and the other audience members that arrived early were told to wait in the lobby. Concetta Bertolli literally had to pass through this area to get to where she had to be. As she does so, she makes small talk with the crowd.
On time, and at this point, it's very important to mention she's not saying anything that's of any psychic value.
Right.
So I had a little bit of time to play politician and kiss the ring a little. I wanted her to see me, and it was just me and three other people. And I wanted her to kind of develop a rapport with me. And hopefully when I did raise my hand, this plus the neon green shirt,
Right.
that was completely
Perfect combination.
Perfect combination. And I think also that I was young.
Right.
And I think when she sees somebody young, and I think I know this based on also watching John Edward, I think a young person, I think, attracts a certain level of energy. And I also think that a psychic or a medium, whatever it may be, they see a young person, they feel like, okay, this is not somebody that's trying to get, how do I say this? Trying to get connected to somebody who just died from old age or their Aunt Sally. This is maybe something that's very peculiar.
Right.
As we found out with those teenagers who had a friend who had just passed way before their time. So I sat in the front row, had the neon green shirt, and I got called on, I guess, 4th or 5th.
Oh, no, so it worked. It
worked. This is important to mention. It's very, very quick because she's got a lot of people to get to. And the show is only about 2 hours. Now, what's interesting about that is that 2 hours seems a lot, but it's not because there's so many people to get to and it goes so quick. And she might spend 10 minutes on somebody because that person is really trying to think of what she's trying to say. Somebody will say, for example, she'll be saying, oh, well, do you have a friend named something, something, and something? And they go, I don't have a friend. And there's a lot of jockeying back and forth. Right. Sometimes it's very quick because the person's able to say, oh, yeah, I do have a friend named Tom or a friend named Joe or whatever it may be. And, oh, yeah, absolutely. So when she picked me, I think she was attracted to the neon green shirt, but I also think it was because I was young. And I was around primarily, I would say, women in their late 40s, early 50s, and definitely 60s.
So you stuck out.
Definitely stuck out. So she goes, okay. She goes, it gives me the microphone, and she had handlers that were helping her. They gave me the microphone, and she goes, all right. She goes, I feel like, she goes, are you really you're really into the computer? She was like, you type really, really quickly. She goes, I'm seeing you typing really, really quickly. And I go, yeah. I go, I have about 15, 20 minutes in between school, in between classes, and I'm just typing really quickly. She goes, I'm seeing that, absolutely. She goes, okay. She goes, you have somebody who's deceased, and she's very, very quick because she knows she's on the clock.
Right.
So she goes, I feel like you have a deceased person who's almost like a father. And I said, my father. And I just cut to the chase. I said, my father. I said, he passed on. She goes, okay, he's coming through. She goes, he has somebody he's with. And they're missing a leg. I go, missing a leg? I said, no. I go, I don't know who that is. And she kind of looked a little embarrassed because now I'm not verifying.
Right.
I'm not perking up and going, yes, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Uncle Clarence has one leg.
Yeah, no. And I'm like, and she goes, she wants me to, your father wants me to mention to you that he has this person with him. They're attached. And the leg, the one leg, she goes, I'm not saying this person still is missing a leg, but here on Earth, they did not have a leg and they're together. And your father says, have, faith in yourself. You're on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing, which of course is very ambiguous.
Right.
I believe it was something that
very,
was
like greeting card message. It could be interpreted that way.
It's very Hallmarkish. So of course I'm like, who the hell is this person with this leg? I called my mom after and I said, and interestingly enough, I didn't tell her I went to this reading. I wasn't telling her this. So I said, hey, Mom, what's up? And she said, hey, what's up? I'm like, listen, I'm at the psychic reading. And she goes, what? I told her, and she goes, oh God. And so I said, Dad came through and he has somebody who's missing a leg or half of a leg. And she goes, that was his cousin. His cousin was in Vietnam.
Ah.
And he had a leg that was missing and they were extremely close, almost like brothers. Sometimes there was a little bit of a separation between cousins. With this, it wasn't. And so that was something that was a little bit of a disappointment to me. I just spent about $60 on a ticket to get to Secaucus and listen to something that was just really nebulous to my life.
Sort of generic.
Very generic, and I don't...
But interesting that she did nail the...
it was
connection
interesting.
with the one leg, but again, to your validation and while you were there, not that helpful.
And it's the only thing that you can take from that is that any type of comfort is that the person that you're trying to reach is still around you. They're still in there. They're still present.
Right.
And I knew that ahead of time. That wasn't something that was a concern of mine. But I walked away a little bit melancholy and a little bit jaded.
But that's interesting that it worked out that way because she didn't give you some kind of huge insight into your life like the first reading was like that.
No.
But it was still correct information about your life. So
right. It was still accurate.
It's the midway point between what Tom asked before, are there complete duds?
It was still accurate.
Right.
It was still accurate. And it's I think the best advice also going along the advice lane, the best advice I can give somebody is to really try to find somebody who has some type of notoriety and somebody who's either been established because a friend has already seen them or somebody who has a book.
Somebody who's reputable.
Somebody who's reputable, but not somebody who's too reputable. Because somebody who's too reputable, and when I say reputable, I shouldn't use that word, but too famous.
Right.
They try to shock the world with their amazing capabilities. And I feel like those are the type of people that are most dangerous because they'll be on, let's say, Maury Povich, and they've got a whole audience and a whole television audience at home. It's this person's famous. They're going to come up with something. And that's when they start to fib a little.
Right.
Because they have to. Because they have that reputation.
Well, and that's when you've crossed the line out from a private reading into more of showmanship, entertainment value.
And fraud.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And fraud. And,
right.
and the best example I can give you is...
Sylvia Browne.
Sylvia Browne.
I knew it.
Sylvia Browne is probably rotting right now somewhere
She's dead.
She is dead.
Oh, she is?
She's dead.
I didn't know
She
that.
passed away.
And
I'm glad you mentioned her because I feel the same way.
She was on every single week with Maury Povich. Maury Povich was very, very desperate for guests back in the 90s. Tried to be like a male Oprah. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, actually, it wasn't Maury Povich. I think it was Montel. Was it Montel Williams?
It could have been Montel.
It might have been Montel Williams.
You just slandered Maury Povich for no reason.
I did. And so she would sit there and she was very generic with her. Okay, you have a friend named Joseph, or blah, 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 blah. A couple instances, and there's actually a blooper reel of Sylvia Browne on YouTube that you can
we'll
look
link
up.
to it.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a couple scenarios where she tells somebody of basically she's dead wrong. But essentially, she thinks she's right or she's fibbing, and she's dead wrong.
Right, and she can't backpedal at that point.
So, a perfect example of this is somebody stands up in the audience. At least this is what I saw in the YouTube video that anybody can probably find by just searching Sylvia Browne. Somebody stands up. It's a younger woman, and she says,
I lost my boyfriend tragically a few years ago. They never found him. And I've had such a hard time since. Every day.
The reason why you didn't find him is because he's in water. And find him in water, it's like the girl that's missing in Aruba. You can't find somebody.
Well, it was September 11th. There was no, he was a fireman, but there was
Well, no, see, I keep seeing him in water. Is there any way he could have drowned in water some way?
They never found a piece of him. Nothing.
From 9/11.
Because he says he couldn't breathe and he was filled with water. Well, if they were trying to put the fire out, Montel.
It could have been, yeah.
No, they won't find him, but honey, that's okay because it doesn't matter if they find him or not, he's still over there.
so another instance of this is where she has told somebody that, told two parents who know that their son was just kidnapped a couple weeks ago. She tries to provide them this great insight as to where their body may be found. And she goes as far as to say that the young boy is deceased. He was killed by his captors. And she goes, but the body, she goes, is found in this crazy wooded area.
Here we go again with the wooded area. So southwest of you.
Is there any landmarks around?
Yeah.
And she goes, there's these crazy boulders, these like jagged boulders where the body
which
is.
look really misplaced because everything is trees, and then all of a sudden you've got these stupid boulders sitting there.
And that's where you'll find him.
He's near the boulders.
Is he still with us?
Do you see the bicycle anywhere?
I think here's what's strange. I think the bicycle is in another state in a dump.
This puts into motion this search for the body. They never find him. Well, as it turns out, the boy was found alive about 11 years later.
See, she has a track record of being wrong.
Yeah. And so I feel like somebody who has gone almost too big for their bridges is not somebody you ever want to go to. It might not be somebody you're able to even gain access to.
Right.
But it's not somebody that you want to aspire to get a hold of because
their motives are wrong.
Their motives are wrong. And I mean, if you look at that medium from Long Island, who's now on television, she, I feel based on what I'm seeing, a lot of it is staged. A lot of it's staged. You're not going to tell me that she goes into a random nail salon and just is able just to randomly pick up on somebody and they go, what?
Everywhere she goes, and it's always good.
And there's a cameraman right there too. It's already waiting.
I stop and take a picture, and I'm looking, and I'm listening to spirit. Let me ask you, so I'm a medium, which means that I'm able to connect with people that have crossed over. Who's the father figure for you that's departed?
My dad.
He also talks about yellow roses with you, so don't be...
Oh, no, I put yellow roses on his vase, just Father's Day, though.
Perfect, that's fine.
Okay. When she mentioned that, I was like, how does she know this?
And what's interesting, too, is unlike a talk show or even like the John Edwards show, like you said, that's more of a reality TV show. It's not
basically
just her readings.
You know, it's funny that you mention that because that's essentially what happens. The line is blurred between somebody who has these capabilities to reach out to either the future or reach out to the deceased and a reality TV show. And that's definitely what happens when somebody gets too famous and they're on a show. I can't say that for everybody, but this person has, Sylvia Browne has absolutely, I think, lost most credibility in most people's eyes based on these situations.
I used to work in Barnes and Noble. I remember, going through the New Age section, and I shelving her books, and I remember peeking into one and just reading a little bit of it. And she says how she explores the astral cosmos with her spirit guide Francine, and all this stuff like that. And I was like,
she's mentioned that many times.
I was like, this just sounds like a load of shit from the start.
And she comes up with, I think, out of all the psychics and all the mediums who are out there, I think Sylvia Browne tried to provide the biggest insight, or let's say the most pinpointed insight into the afterworld. And she basically describes the afterworld, or described the afterworld as this almost kind of like a restored ancient Rome. That type of architecture, that type of grandeur, that type of attention to detail. But that was just one of her theories. I don't think it's something that can be bought now because her other scenarios.
Credibility.
That was the one thing she got right. Is the afterlife is completely classicism. It's Hellenistic Greece and Rome put together.
Right.
All right, we're going to end it there. There is obviously going to be a part 3 from our sit-down interview with Bert, but the 2 group readings, once again, just some incredible stuff, a lot of details, a lot of interesting stories of what Bert himself got read, as well as the people around him. And I'm just very impressed with the woman nailing. It's cool to me that he was unaware of this one-legged relative who was in Vietnam, was friends with his father, that came through. And I think it's cool that his mom is able to verify that, that was your father's cousin. They were close, like brothers. It's cool that he didn't even know that. So it makes you think, how could this random woman have known that?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I got to say, I found just his personal take on the experiences. Like, you've seen these shows on television, and you know you have. And it's just interesting to hear from a first-person perspective of someone who's like gearing up to go to one of these and what they experienced beforehand and what they feel emotionally as it's all going on. Because you kind of just watch the show and you're kind of just very passive about it, and you just kind of say, I wonder if this stuff's real. And then you flip the channel. But this is like getting deep into it. Very interesting.
That's true. And what I love, as I've said before in previous episodes, we are at some point going to have to go to a medium and just do an interview, talk to them, and also try to get a reading just to see what it's like and see if it's real and do my Houdini test. But I love all the tips and little insights that he gives, like the group reading, wearing a bright shirt so you stand out so you get spotted, showing up early so you can kind of schmooze with the medium. He just gives so many great tips, and he's a great interview. He's funny, he's entertaining, and it's got great stories.
Now, just a quick side note. In the last episode, I don't know if you remember, Tommy suggested that we come up with a phrase to share through a medium in case one of us dies. And since then, we actually came up with a phrase. And unfortunately, I've already forgotten it.
That's awesome, because I was going to wait till we get off and tell you I forgot what it was as well. So when we get off this episode, we will have to write it down and then
you
destroy
can't write
it.
it down. All right, we'll see. We have to destroy it.
Well, we'll just talk about it and try and remember.
Yeah, because we failed miserably on remembering what our code was going to be. So
good thing neither of us died in between then and now, because we would have completely wiped out my Houdini test.
Yeah, the lady would have been like, he's saying jalapeno cheese. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Or if he just said he doesn't remember, maybe that would have worked. But
that's too vague, though.
That's true. We'll come up with
true.
We'll come up with something, nail that down. But definitely, you should come back, because next episode of the Brothers Mysterium, we're going to have the conclusion of our sit-down interview with Bert.
Next time on the Brothers Mysterium.
Find out what happens when another one of Bert's relatives passes away, and he once again reaches out to the other side.
Let me ask you something. And this is where I try to do some digging. And I said, let me ask you something. I said, can you see them?
I wouldn't say we have it committed to memory, seeing as how we just remembered it like 3 minutes ago.
Now, I'm telling you, that is definitely something a skeptic would claw all over. The question of, if somebody commit suicide, do they go to the afterworld? Is there some type of punishment?
Sometimes things like this leave you with more questions than answers. The clips of Sylvia Browne come from the Montel Williams Show. The clips of Teresa Caputo are from the show Long Island Medium. Additional voices were provided by Dan and Gwen Hudson, and as always, our theme song is performed by The Nevergrin. Great band, go check them out. We'd like to thank Bert for sharing his story, and we'd like to thank everybody out there for all the positive feedback we've gotten so far for the first few episodes. If you have more praise for us and positive feedback, we'd love to hear that. Or if you think that we suck and our show sucks, we'd love to hear that too. You can reach us on Gmail, thebrothersmysterium@gmail.com. Send us a tweet @MysteriumBros. We're on YouTube. Give us a comment or a direct message there. Or you can find us through our official Facebook page, facebook.com/thebrothersmysterium. We invite you to contact us if you have a story that you want to share, you have a topic you want to hear us discuss, if you agree with us, disagree with us, you know anything more about a particular place that we've talked about on the show, anything like that. As always, please reach out to us, let us know. And thank you once again for listening to the Brothers Mysterium.